All right, so now this is part two about why the U.S. intervened in the Vietnam War. Right, if you haven't seen the first episode, go watch it. Now, the U.S. doesn't really intervene, right? So after was it the French were defeated on Dien Bien Phu, we were like, okay, stop. Like what? Look, this isn't worth it. All right, you're a tiny piece of land, thousands of miles away from France. We don't want anything to do with here. Okay, you can have it. I don't care. So Laos and Cambodia gets independence. Vietnam gets its independence as well. And they basically go to America like, okay, it's fine. It's over. It's Vietnam's communist. I don't care. I've lost too much in this. So they leave. However, they drop the ball. The ball is Vietnam. America picks the ball before it touches the ground. So Vietnam's like, here we go again. But thankfully, they didn't do much, right? So instead, they have a talk, the Geneva Accords, and Vietnam was split in half, like kind of like Korea. So you're like, okay, let's try. So Vietnam gets the North. North Vietnam is communist, and the South is under the French and American backed Ngo Dai. All right, he was a former emperor, one of the emperors of the Chung Dynasty before it got colonized. And however, in a couple of years, it was rigged, and Dien Bien Phu, he overthrew Bao Dai, and became the first and last prime minister of Southern Vietnam. And he really didn't even care about the Geneva Accords, right? He just rigged the elections, and while he did let them vote on reunity or not. Obviously, he became controversial immediately, all right? People protested, and also he was anti-Buddhist. And while back then, 90% of the Southern Vietnamese population, Buddhists. So yeah, they started protesting, peaceful protests, but they always got shut down. There was a Vietnamese Buddhist man who self-immolated himself as a sign of protest, all right? What that means, he sat down in prayer and burned himself alive. Yeah. Obviously not good. So obviously that starts, Ho Chi Minh starts the Viet Cong, which is a huge army designed to, we're gonna rebel against the South and let the North deal with it. So obviously the North and the South go into a war, and thanks to the Ho Chi Minh Trail, they go into the South and keep invading. And will eventually it lasts for years, right? Agent Orange, mines dropped on Laos and Vietnam, people dying, mutations, infections, a lot of terrible stuff. And all these in 1972, when, South Vietnamese government was actively deteriorating, right? Dien Bien Phu was dead. He got assassinated by his own officers. Because while he already rigged the election, he was already unpopular with the public, general public. And also, he usually didn't listen to any of his allies, right? He was also reluctant to, do anything with America at all, even though they were his biggest backer and ally. So he was assassinated previously. And also, the U.S. had, withdrawn large amounts of troops, all right? Sure, there were Americans still there, but troop numbers lowered down significantly, all right? And they only sent supplies, which is a problem because, not much of the army really wants to fight anymore. It's 1972. People want to come back to a united Vietnam, and it didn't really last for long. All right, 3 years later, Saigon Radio, which was a radio network for South Vietnam, issued a art of surrender. All right, they surrendered their land. The government must be dismantled. Any sort of flags, de-South Vietnamization, kind of like that. And also, all Americans have to leave within 24 hours. So in 1975, the last American leaves Vietnam, and then on 30th of May, 1975, which is when they seized victory and the last American left. So yeah, Vietnam's united again. So it failed. So, the U.S. failed to stop the spread of communism in Vietnam. They also failed to stop the Khmer Rouge, but however, they didn't really intervene with that. All right, there were talks in Europe and stuff about the Khmer Rouge, but they didn't really intervene. And that would also lead to that would lead to the Cambodian War, obviously leading to a Cambodian defeat because they were idiots. well, China was an ally of course, the Khmer Rouge, because they're the exact same dictators and stuff. So obviously they invade Vietnam, and Vietnam holds back. They finish Cambodia off, retreat, and then fight back. All right, they suffered so many casualties because the war-hardened, battle-hungry Vietnamese soldiers, they crushed the new recruits. All right, multiple Chinese people were dying against Vietnamese because you don't fight a nation that's gone already through 20 years of fighting. Right? They fought France, won. The United States won. You are going to be one of them. All right, you're gonna lose. So yeah, that's part 2. So in the end, in conclusion, this is what happens. The U.S. fails to stop the spread of communism in Southeast Asia. CEDAW is dissolved 2 years afterwards. Cambodia becomes communist. And China attempts to invade Vietnam again, but fails. So, yeah, that's my whole video. Thanks for watching, and goodbye. See you next time.